I've taken my subject for the talk from the overall theme of got here, Awakenings, Journey to Inner Peace. And really it's about approaches to a higher self. And I've been struck, as we've gone through this week, by the number of resonances for what we've heard from other speakers, and also from the study groups, about what I think you see in this talk that I'm about to give. I'm acutely aware that I'm talking to a very knowledgeable audience, so if I see you nodding off, I know I've pictured it wrong. Right. Introduction. Blake said, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. I'm going to talk or quote quite a few poems in this talk, because I think that they speak to the soul and the intuition and go beyond the intellect. And this image from William Blake is really speaking about seeing infinity in the smallest thing. The talk draws on my experience of theosophy and how I came to find it. It has a personal selection of quotes from HPB, Christmas Humphreys, who was a theosophist who started the Buddhist Lodge, which then became the Buddhist Society, drawn quite a lot from him, and other writers and traditions. Robert Browning said, "Truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from out of things, whate'er you may believe. There is an inmost centre in us all, where truth abides in fullness, and around, wall upon wall, the gross flesh hems us in. To know, rather, consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendour may escape, than in effecting entry for a light supposed to be without." I think it's worth saying at this stage that theosophy has no monopoly on truth. There is a phrase, the perennial philosophy, which was used by Aldous Huxley in his book with the same name, Perennial Philosophy, which is about the one reality, and it is a very good anthology of that. But I think theosophy does help us understand and see where truth is, wherever it may be. Perennial philosophy is immemorial and universal, and all religions, all races and all ages speak of it. So in this book, Aldous Huxley said, "Our eternal self is one with the divine reality, expressed succinctly in the Sanskrit, that art thou. The Atman, or immanent eternal self, is one with Brahman, the absolute principle of all existence. And the last end of every human being is to discover the fact for himself or herself, to find out who he or she really is." I think that sort of sums everything up, really. The last end of every human being is to discover the fact for himself or herself, to find out who he or she really is. So a little bit about me, my early influences. I had a conventional, comfortable, middle-class upbringing. I had 3 other siblings, all of them sisters, so lucky me. And but my mother was the only one of us family who had spiritual beliefs, apart from myself. I was never a churchgoer. For reasons that are still quite unclear to me, I was confirmed in the Church of England at age 11. I think possibly it's because even at that stage I had some dim inkling that the physical wasn't the only part of us. But I did fall out of love, if I ever was in it, with the church in the sense of the rather muddy theology that I saw there, and also I wasn't that keen on the ceremonial side of things either. But despite all its faults, I still support the little local church in our Norfolk village, partly because it's been there 700 years, and I don't want to see it go. Let's see now. Let's see if I'm missing anything here. So my mother had quite a large library of interesting books, at least interesting to me. People like Paul Brunton, Aldous Huxley I've mentioned, Krishnamurti, Gurdjieff and Spensky, a book by somebody called F.W.H. Myers, who wrote, a Victorian writer who wrote about the survival of the human personality after death. Various theosophical authors, Colin Wilson, popular writer of the time. And those were there, and I sort of looked into them every now and again. But the real discovery of the world of spirit, if I can put it like that, was when I read one particular book, which was this one. And this is the actual book I read. Apologise for the coffee stains. 14 Lessons in Yogi Philosophy by Yogi Ramacharaka, who wasn't a yogi, it wasn't an Indian yogi, it was William Walker Atkinson, an American. Nevertheless, I don't know if in your lives, significant points in your life, you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when something didn't happen. But I well remember I was in a bedroom in my parents' house and I was reading that book, and I was looking at the fact that it was making it clear in there that we're spiritual beings, not just bodies, and there's a whole world of spirit that we can't see. The fact of reincarnation and karma. And I just remember the hot excitement of reading that, and combined with a sense of familiarity. And, there weren't choirs of angels, but there probably should be. Just like that. It really changed my life and my thinking forever after, really. So then I looked into these books more deeply, and I gradually settled on theosophy as my sort of go-to philosophy. You may say, well, why was that? I think, although many religions and schools of thought have guidance on the spiritual way and looking inward and the path and so on, what theosophy to me offered was a coherent and logical structure which addressed the big questions of life. Who are we? Where are we going? What's it all about? And theosophy set that broader picture, if you like, in a way which the other ones didn't, or at least in their exoteric form. And I didn't know much about the esoteric side of things then. But also, theosophy has a good deal about treading the spiritual path. So, having decided I was interested in theosophy, I then started reading theosophical books, which at that stage was Annie Besant, and led me to that side of things. But I also joined the Reigate Lodge, which conveniently was only 3 miles away. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. And I remember I was in the station underpass at Red Hill Station, and there was just a little hand-painted poster, quite small, saying, asking about the questions of life, and then saying the Theosophical Lodge meets in the Reigate. So I got my mother to take me along, because I couldn't drive at the time, and met really just a huge a range of people at the Theosophical Lodge, very inviting, and I swiftly joined the TS then. Must have been about 18 or so at the time. And the value was face-to-face rather than books, because the conversation sort of moved you on, because somebody said, you do know about back to Blavatsky movement, do you? And I said, well, what's that? You know, so then it explained to me that it was movement away from the old style Besant Levy to approach. And that got me onto the Blavatsky path. Also, somebody said to me, you do realise we're not separate. I said, what's that about? You know, so then that whole side of things was revealed to me. And we also did study groups of the secret doctrine. We had two very eminent theosophists who came down from Teckles Park called Frank Coulsting and Jane Hammond. I think I understood about a fifth of what they said as we went through the secret doctrine, but I think some of it dropped off anyway. But I think that all of that's about the value of actually meeting people, you know, being in a lodge. Whether you get that, I mean, try to, that's for sure. Okay. So, difference between theoretical and practical occultism. HPB says, it's easy to become a theosophist. Any person of average intellectual capacities and a leaning towards the metaphysical, of pure, unselfish life, who finds more joy in helping his neighbour than in receiving help himself. One who is ever ready to sacrifice his own pleasures for the sake of other people, and who loves truth, goodness and wisdom for their own sake, not for the benefit they may confer, is a theosophist. Well, I think I might quibble a bit about the easy. But she does then go on to talk about the difference between theosophy in terms of its teachings and actually practicing it in terms of occult science. But it's quite another matter to put oneself upon the path which leads to the knowledge of what is good to do, as to the right discrimination of good from evil, a path which also leads a man to that power through which he can do the good he desires, often without even apparently lifting a finger. So, I think you may be familiar with the term the inner battle. Christmas Humphreys had rather a pithy phrase for this. There is a battleground in all of us. We look at animals in cages, but each of us is caged within an animal. And we look at ourselves. I think these days we don't look at animals so much in cages, but I think you get the idea. So there's the familiar battle between the upward pressure of the spirit within us, Atma Bhali, and the higher manners, and the battle with the lower self, lower manners, astral, prana, etheric, and physical, and so on. But a question to consider, which occurs to me every now and again, knowing the theosophical teachings, you know, we try to improve our character. Does that mean we're on a path, if not the path? When does the path happen? I'll just leave that with you. HPB quotes from Shakespeare's Macbeth. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Well, HPB says it may signify nothing on its own, but if you look at a series of lives, it means everything. I'm going to quote in full now Christmas Humphreys, what I think is rather a beautiful poem on the higher self. Be seated thou, unfettered, free, the heart's attention poised as third of three. Now still the mind, nor claim the unceasing flow. He holds the unbounded heavens in fee, who learns the uttermost command, let go. Now seal with cold resolve the doors of sense. Be still, my son, and seek thine innerness. I am not body, I am never ill, nor restless, weary, fretful, nor in pain. I am not hot emotion, nor the will, which forfeits progress in the name of gain. I am not thought, the process of the mind, on caging partial truth intent. Unknowing, for its eyes are blind, the wings of life beat ever unconfined. I am not any instrument. I am the light that slays the night at dawning. I am the love that woos its own reward. I am the slow resolve that wakes at morning and sleeps at twilight on a sheathed sword. I am the golden joy of beauty. I am the stillness of underlying sound. I am the voice of undistinguished beauty. I am the self in which the self is drowned. I just love that, and particularly that last couplet, I am the voice of undistinguished duty. I am the self in which the self is drowned. So now I want to talk about how I've described the path to the self. And this doesn't mean that I've done all these things, it's just that I've sort of identified the need to be done. And I've done it in the sense of a 5-pointed star, which contains the headings, motive. Have we examined our motives for doing this? Study, very important, and I've got some of HPB's guidance on study. Meditation, the third one, many of us meditate, but why do we do it and what's the objective? Service, what do HPB and others writers say about service to others? And the fifth and most difficult, putting it all together and living it. First one of those, then motive. HPB placed tremendous importance on correct motive. The first necessity for obtaining self-knowledge is to become profoundly conscious of ignorance, to feel with every fibre of the heart that one is ceaselessly self-deceived. Profoundly conscious of ignorance, it's easy to say, but what do we feel when somebody congratulates us on an achievement, or we learn something new and we're proud of ourselves? Is it about how clever we are with a little learning? This is how pride creeps in. Along these lines, there's quite an amusing quote which is attributed to Mark Twain. Mark Twain, he says, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. So I left home. But when I returned at 21, I was astonished at how much he'd learned in 7 years." The dangers of selfish or impure motive are manifold. This is HPB again. The adept becomes so only by bringing every atom of his being into subjection to the divine will. It is the motive and motive alone which determines whether an occult act is good or evil. Christmas Humphreys again says, "There is only one right motive for mind development, an understanding of the nature and purpose of man's evolution, and the will to hasten that evolution in order that all life may be the sooner brought to enlightenment." I think that's a laudable objective, but I wonder how sustainable it is. There's a danger that what maybe you think of as you're doing for all mankind, you're in fact doing for yourself. It seems to me that you can actually look at moving ahead because there's no other way to go. You can't go back, you can't stand still, and the spirit within you is always moving you on. Spiritual pride. HBB warns of the lurking dangers of pride linked to acquiring knowledge or skills. The first necessity for the student is to learn to separate the real from the unreal, the true from the false, and to beware above all of spiritual pride, which is the first and deadliest enemy of progress. Again, a little knowledge is perhaps a bad thing. Many spiritual authorities warn about it. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explicitly lists pride as a characteristic of those with a demoniac nature. Pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of a demoniac nature, O son of Prita. So, I like to think I'm not prideful, but sometimes it occurs to me that people who don't know about philosophy or anything spiritual, you sort of feel sorry for them. Or worse still, sometimes you look down on them. But, that's pride, isn't it? So you got to be really careful. Pride and humility. The Bible quotes Jesus, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." So little children are eager to learn, and they don't have the baggage of pride. And I like this quote. I'm not in the habit of quoting from evangelical preachers, but I think this is a good one. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Good one. So we're on to the second topic of our five-pointed style study. Study, not an end in itself. And I think here, it's been said earlier today, isn't it? It's not intellectual learning. We need to live the teachings. HBB had quite a lot to say about studying theosophy as recorded in the Bowen Notes. And the Bowen Notes, for those who don't know, is a student of HBB called Robert Bowen. And then towards the last days of her life, before she passed over, she gave some quite pithy statements, if you like, on theosophy and how to study it. And I've just got these here. HBB says that reading the secret doctrine page by page, as one reads any other book, will only end in confusion. The first thing to do, she says, even if it takes years, is to get some grasp of the three fundamental principles given in the proem. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. Follow that up by a study of the recapitulation, the numbered items in the summing up to Volume 1, Part 1. Then take the preliminary notes, Volume 2, and the conclusion, Volume 2. I've not actually done that, I'm going to put it. Also in the Bowen Notes are 4 key ideas, which I think it's worth. I think these are the essence of theosophy, and so it's worth just reading these out. And we've heard this before this week many times. The fundamental unity of all existence. This is quoting from them. This unity is a thing altogether different from the common notion of unity, as when we say that a nation or an army is united, or that this planet is united to that by lines of magnetic force or the like. The teaching is not that. It is that existence is one thing, capitalized, not any collection of things linked together. Fundamentally, there is one being. This being has two aspects, positive and negative. The positive spirit or consciousness. The negative is substance, the subject of consciousness. This being is the absolute in its primary manifestation. Being absolute, there is nothing outside it. It is all being. It is indivisible, else it will not be absolute. Second fundamental idea. The second idea to hold fast to, she says, is that there is no dead matter. Every last atom is alive. It cannot be otherwise, since every atom is itself fundamentally absolute being. There's the logic of it. The third basic idea, she said, to be held to is that man is the microcosm. As he is so, then all the hierarchies of the heavens exist within him. But in truth, there is neither macrocosm nor microcosm, but one existence. Great and small are such only as viewed by a limited consciousness. The fourth and last basic idea to be held is that expressed in the great Hermetic axiom. It really sums up and synthesizes all the others. As is the inner, so is the outer. As is the great, so is the small. As it is above, so it is below. There is but one life and law, and he that worketh it is one. Nothing is inner, nothing is outer. Nothing is great, nothing is small. Nothing is high, nothing is low in the divine economy. So that does sum it up, doesn't it? But also, HPB also says not to anchor ourselves in her as the final authority, nor to anyone else, but to depend altogether upon our own widening perceptions. I've already referred to theosophical writers being not the only source of spiritual truth. And as I said before, an understanding of theosophy does help you identify the truth in other areas. And this book is a very good, it's a non-theosophical ontology of evidence of one reality in various religions. Rhetorical question, can you attain the secret wisdom simply by study? And the answer from HPB is a resounding no. Which takes us on to meditation. HPB said, meditation is silent and unuttered prayer, or as Plato expressed it, the ardent turning of the mind towards the divine. Not to ask any particular good, as is the common meaning of prayer, but for good itself, for the universal supreme good, of which we are part on earth, and out of the essence of which we have all emerged. And HPB drew her teachings on meditation, or at least had much in common with the Eastern philosophies of Raja Yoga and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's a rather impressive picture of a chariot driven by, pulled by horses. Meaning of this will become clear in a minute. So, why do we meditate? And they commonly, people meditate for all sorts of reasons, but in our context, it's often to try to reach further to the higher self, or to improve ourselves. And Christmas Humphreys says, purpose of meditation to dominate the lower separative self, to develop the mind's own higher faculties, and to unite this dual process in one continuous spiritual unfolding. So you didn't realise that, did you, when you were meditating? But then he goes on to say that dominating the lower separative self is a lot to do with the science of character building. But he also says that meditation helps in that process. And he also mentions the point about higher faculties not being psychism or CDs or any of these other things, but a general raising of the consciousness. And again, the purpose, fusing the two opposing aspects of the self into an undivided unity. We have a rather a pithy phrase for this. What's that? It's something like the driver needs to be in control of the stallions of desire. Something like that. Concentration and meditation, those two words are often put together. And potentially, it's the sutras say concentration or dharana is a necessary prerequisite for meditation or dhyana. The voice of the silence says, when he has ceased to hear the many, he may discern the one, the inner sound, nada, which kills the outer distractions. Then only, not till then, shall he forsake the region of asat, the false, to come into the realm of sat, the true. And again, he would hear the voice of nada, the soundless sound, and comprehend it. He has to learn the nature of dharana. In other words, concentration. Same time, same place. I apologise to mention things obvious, but if you meditate at the same time of day, in the same place, you're building a habit, aren't you? And habits are difficult, bad habits are difficult to get rid of, but good habits are a force in favour of us, aren't they? And the lower mind doesn't want to meditate, then we'll find lots of other things to do, or get us to do, like worry about what's for breakfast, or the garden needs weeding, or I've got these emails to do, or 100 other things, which takes, when I start meditating, it takes me a few minutes to get through all that. But then, although I say I'm going to meditate for a quarter of an hour, usually I look at my watch and it's 20 minutes or half an hour, and I don't know where the time's gone. Yeah. This is a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, who's a German gentleman from the turn of the last century. And this poem reflects the inner silence. I love the dark hours of my being, my mind deepens into them. There I can find, as in old letters, the days of my life already lived and held like a legend and understood. Then the knowing comes. I can open to another life that's wide and timeless. So I'm sometimes like a tree rustling over a gravesite and making real the dream of the one its living roots embrace, a dream once lost among sorrows and songs. And Wayne, would you please, there's a quote from Rumi here. A voice out of this world calls on our soul not to wait anymore. Our call is the way we move our feet, our tears the way we wash a room. Be quiet now and wait. It may be the ocean one, the one we want so to move in and become, may stretch out its arms and enfold us. Wait and do not speak. Listening to the divine. Right, now we're on to the fourth topic of our 5-pointed star. It's service to others. HBB said that service is at the heart of spiritual development. He who does not practice altruism, who is not prepared to share his last morsel with a weaker or a poorer than himself, who neglects to help his brother man, of whatever race, nation or creed, whenever and wherever he meets suffering, and who turns a deaf ear to the cry of human misery, who hears an innocent person slandered, and does not undertake his defence as he would undertake his own, is no theosophist. In the voice of the silence, it says, yet one word, canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is no attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony, the liar's self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right, and the fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. It's a very strong paragraph, isn't it? And the phrase, a shoreless universal essence, really rings. And my experience with personal service, however small it is that it helps you grasp the enormity of human suffering. And it's not just in foreign lands, it's in next door, it's in our local town, it's everywhere. And it helps develop in us an empathy with other human beings. And it also, in my experience, helps us to become less self-centered. HPB also said, excuse me, true occultism or theosophy is the great renunciation of self, unconditionally and absolutely, in thought as in action. It is altruism, and it throws him who practices it out of the calculation of the ranks of the living altogether. Not for himself, but for the world he lives, as soon as he has pledged himself to the work. Tagore says, the day when I see all that I give to others as a gift from thee, that day I truly serve. And Edward Markham, there is a destiny that makes us brothers. None goes his way alone. All that we send into the lives of others comes back into our own. We know that from karma, don't we? The key thing for me in service is to focus on the needs of people you're serving and forget yourself. And it is easier when you see the needs that are out there. Service to others is a moral law and a spiritual truth. From the Bhagavad Gita, thus is the path of selfless action shown, work done in duty with no need to earn. He who performs with heart detached and pure serves all mankind and makes the soul endure. So we're on to the last of our five-pointed star, living it, which is the most difficult bit, it's about putting together all the other bits and pieces that I've talked about earlier on. Integrating it all into day-to-day living. Because to be effective, living all this needs to be done all the time, not just on occasion. And it's a bit like French lessons, isn't it? You can take any number of French lessons. You could do it once or twice a week over, and in 5 years, you may learn a lot of verbs or adjectives and things. But will you be able to speak French? Probably not. But if you go to France and you have to speak it all the time, then you learn it pretty quickly. On that line, there is a phrase in the Pali Canon, mindful and self-possessed, to live all day and every day mindful and self-possessed. And how, brethren, is a brother self-possessed? Herein, brethren, a brother, both in his going forth and his home returning, acts composedly. In looking forward and in looking back, he acts composedly. In bending or stretching arm or body, he acts composedly. In wearing his robes and bearing bowl and robe. In eating, chewing, drinking, swallowing. In relieving nature's needs. In going, standing, sitting, sleeping, waking, speaking, keeping silence, he acts composedly. That, brethren, is how a brother is self-possessed. Then let a brother dwell mindful and self-possessed. This is my advice to you, brethren. So we're talking about actions. All actions have a purpose and a motive. Purpose is what we're doing, the motive is why. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to pupil Arjuna, you have the right to work, but never to the fruit of work. Let not the fruits of action be your motive, nor let your attachment be to inaction. Perform your duty equipoise, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. Indifference to the fruits of action is referred to by Tennyson. Self-reverence, self-knowledge, self-control, these three alone lead life to sovereign power. Yet not for power, power of herself become uncalled for, but to live by law, acting a law we live by without fear. And because right is right, to follow right were wisdom and the scorn of consequence. And because right is right, to follow right were wisdom and the scorn of consequence. Or to put it another way, as Charles Kingsley put it, do the work that's nearest, though it's dull at whiles, helping when you meet them, lame dogs over stiles. Tennyson again. Man's free will is but a bird in a cage. He can stop at the lower perch, or he can mount to a higher. Then that which is and knows will enlarge his cage, give him a higher and higher perch, and at last break off the top of the cage and let him out to one of the free will of the universe. We know that the cage is woven by himself through karma, and as you go forward, you break out of your previous karma. HPB said, no theosophist has the right to this name unless he is thoroughly imbued with the correctness of Carlyle's truism. The end of man is an action and not a thought, though it were the noblest. And unless he sets and models his daily life upon this truth, the profession of a truth is not yet the enactment of it. And the more beautiful and grand it sounds, the more loudly virtue or duty is talked about instead of being acted upon, the more forcibly it will always remind one of the Dead Sea free. It's quoted in the key. So coming back to our five-pointed star and the fivefold path to the self, if you look carefully around the star, you'll see a faint glow, which is the work that's being done on it. And if you look even more carefully, you'll see the white lotus within the star, symbolic of the soul's evolution, unfolding consciousness and spiritual growth. I'll leave you with these words by Christina Rossetti. Does the road wind uphill all the way? Yes, to the very end. Does the journey take the whole long day? From morn till night, my friend. Thank you.